Good morning, everybody. I would like to welcome Dr. Neelam Taleja. We have gathered here for the celebration of World Microbiome Day. And I think I'll just start with a small introduction and then I will be giving it to ma'am so that she can continue. And we know that these microbiome, it swings the pendulum between the health and the disease. And there is a link between the diversity and balance of our microbiome and our susceptibility to the disease. With the abundance of these beneficial microbes, they keep the pathogenic microbes in check and they maintain a harmonious balance. So, the research on microbiome, it has increased dramatically in the recent years because of the advances in the technology, especially the high throughput technologies. And it has yielded insight into nature of the microbial communities, their interactions and effects, which are both within the host and in the external environment as a part of an ecological community. They also contribute to the metabolic functions. They protect against the pathogens directly or indirectly. They affect our physiological functions. And with the new available techniques for the prediction of the microbiota functions, different interaction models and novel analytical and simulation approaches, it will be possible to explore the potential role of these microbiota involved in the mechanisms of various bacterial infections, liver diseases, cancer, psychiatric diseases, and metabolic diseases. These microbiome-based diagnosis and treatment strategies, they will be used for future personalized medicine work. Not taking much of the time because Dr. Neelam, she has taken her time out of a very tight schedule. We have with us ma'am, Dr. Neelam, and she's Professor cum Head, Department of Medical Microbiology, PGI MER, Chandigarh. She's a postgraduate of Lady Hardinge Medical College, Delhi, and she did her postdoc in vaccinology from Pasteur Institute, Paris. She's a recipient of many awards and honors. Just to name a few, she's fellow of International Medical Science Academy, WHO Fellowship on AMR, Wellcome Research Institute Fellowship, Pasteur Institute Fellowship on Vaccinology, then ASM CME Award on AMR, and this is just a few of them which I have mentioned. She has to her credit many best paper awards and international travel grants. She has authored more than 157 national and international research papers and a patent also. She's a member of various professional bodies and societies, like the member of Strategic Partnership UK Research. She's an expert member of National Action Plan of India on AMR. She's expert to Center for Science and Environment, Delhi. She is Executive Council and Editorial Board member of Gastrointestinal Infection Society of India. She has worked in many these extramural projects which are funded by Wellcome Trust UK, DBT, WHO, ICMR, DST, DHFI, in addition to the other PGI intramural institutional projects. And her main area of research, they are the whole genome sequencing to understand the epidemiology, molecular mechanisms, evolution and genomics of AMR in uropathogens and foodborne pathogens, and AMR in environment. Plus, she's involved in surveillance of community-acquired diarrhea, enterotoxigenic E. coli, its epidemiology, ecology, colonization factor analysis, and the important one which we are going to discuss today, that is the gut microbiota and its role in health and disease. So this is also the topic of her talk today. So I would request ma'am to please share her views on these topics. I will just make you the co-host. Yes, Aji ma'am, it is visible.
Dipti, shall we start?
Aji ma'am, Aji.
Am my slides are visible?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Your slides are there. Yeah, you can
And
start.
am I visible?
You're audible also, ma'am. Aji.
Thank you, Dipti, and Dr. Arora for inviting me for this discussion. Now, as Dipti has, and I thank you for the kind introduction also. Dipti has not only introduced the topic, but also has touched upon the relevant concepts, which I am trying to give in a very digestible manner. So my presentation basically is divided into few parts. First, we will deal with what is microbiota, what role does it play in health, in human health, then what diseases are caused by the human gut dysbiosis. Then we will go to the microbiota in animal health and disease and engineering of this microbiome for therapeutic and preventive purposes. Last slides, few slides are about how we study the microbiome with what are the various tools. And this is a vast topic, so I'm trying to give information in a very digestible form. The microbiome studies, the research has become a rage now. This is a new field of research, but actually this is nothing new. Long back, our Ayurveda text recognizes we are what we eat and digest. Jaisa an, vaisa man. And Hippocrates, more than 2000 years back, said all diseases begin in the gut. And as our knowledge about this, the function of this human gut microbiome increases, we are basically leading to this concept. This is becoming more and more true. So microbiota is defined as a sum total of bacteria, archaea, viruses, and fungi, which are present in a defined environment. And microbiome is basically used as synonymously, but it actually means the microbiomes and the genomes. These inhabit all the epithelial barrier surface of the body sides, whatever is exposed to the environment, including our skin, eyes, nose, our oral cavity, the human gut, whole of human gut, and animal gut also, and the vagina and the urethra. But the major part of this microbiome resides in the gut, where 10 to 100 trillion microbes are there, which are 10 times greater than the total number of human cells. And they have a multitude of species, 300 to 1,000 different bacterial species. And 3 pounds of microbes occupy the human gut. And 60% of the stool dry weight is also microbes. Now, I will be, just to give a, as Dr. Mentioned that this microbiome is involved in gut homeostasis. It has metabolic, physiological, immunological, and molecular aspects of the host. And breakdown of any regulatory network can lead to different disease types, such as metabolic disorders, gastrointestinal diseases, and even cancer. But when a disease is advancing, the action of the microbes will rely on the host immune status, its genotype, that is hereditary, and the localization of microbes, whether the microbes are present only in the intestinal mucosa or they have crossed the intestinal mucosa and reached a place where they should not be there. So just to start, that this is picture showing that the gut is how the gut number of bacteria in the microbes vary according to the pH, the location, the antimicrobials, and oxygen content. If you see that the small intestine is sparsely populated, and as we move on, the colon becomes heavily populated, and 10^11 CFU per gram are present in the descending colon. The microbiota also type is also different. Small intestine has lactobacilli and enterobacteriaceae, whereas the large intestine has Bacteroidetes, Prevotella, and Firmicutes. Even the mucosal distribution, that is in the lumen you will find more Bacteroidetes, Prevotella, but in the attached to the mucosa, you will find more Firmicutes. it has to pH in the large intestine is alkaline because even amino acids are broken down, and the small intestine where the bile, the acid and the biles and the enzymes, they produce some, and they have antimicrobial effect. There are a lot of antimicrobial peptides also. So the amount of microbiota is less in the small intestine, and it is also varies to the oxygen content because the large intestine is mainly anaerobic. So we have good and bad bacteria. Good bacteria are bifidobacteria, E. coli, except a few pathotypes, lactobacilli, and the bad bacteria, to give example, Campylobacter, Salmonella, Clostridium difficile, Enterococcus faecalis. These are some of the bad bugs. Now, there are many factors which influence the composition function of gut microbiota. First, starting from mode of delivery, whether it's a vaginal delivery or cesarean delivery, then the baby has been breastfed or bottle fed, then the diet, the composition of the diet, exercise, presence of underlying diseases, aging, whether you have taken antimicrobials or other chemotherapeutic agents, and geographical variations. Like in African children, they have found that there are greater proportion of bacteroidetes and gram-positive organisms in the bowels as compared to European children, where Western lifestyle appears to promote an increase in abundance of firmicutes and gram-negative organisms. Now, the gut colonization starts very early in the infant when the child is born. It's almost sterile gut. So initial acquisition is from the mother's vaginal canal, feces, and the hospital flora. Or if the delivery has been happened in the home environment, it will be the home environment flora. Third is the baby, whether it's being breastfed or bottle fed. Breastfed babies have more bifidobacteria. Up to 90% of the flora is composed of bifidobacteria, and these are good bacteria. Whereas the bottle fed babies, it is more diverse flora. You'll find more bacteroidetes and Clostridial species. And phase 4, when the baby starts eating solids, this shift to adult flora, that is firmicutes and bacteroidetes predominant, and bifidobacteria also remain key component. Now, I told you that it is very important that there are various factors which affect the gut microbiome, and we will take the role of this homeostasis one by one, that the different metabolism processes, what is the role of gut microbiome, inflammation, vitamin synthesis, immune responses, resistance against pathogens, and colonization resistance. I will give you some concepts regarding the role of microbiome. Now, first coming to the carbohydrate metabolism. We know that there is a dietary fiber in the body, which is actually broken down by anaerobic bacteria to short chain fatty acids by fermentation. The bifidobacteria, firmicutes, and bacteroidetes produce these short chain fatty acids. Now, these short chain fatty acids consist of acetate, propionate, and butyrate. They are important for the primary energy source of colonic epithelial cells, and 2/3 of the colonic anion concentration is composed of these. Now, not only they provide energy source, but they regulate intestinal physiology and immune function, while acetate acts as a substrate for lipogenesis and glucogenesis. And majority of the fermentation occurs in the proximal colon, but in the distal colon, proteins or amino acids are used as substrates, so the pH rises. But amino acid fermentation leads to some harmful compounds, potentially harmful compounds like ammonia, phenol, certain amines, and hydrogen sulfide, which might be involved in gut disease such as colon cancer or inflammatory bowel disease. Now, I would like to introduce 3 terms which are very important when we talk about gut microbiome. First is the prebiotic. What is a prebiotic? Prebiotic is a specialized fiber or dietary fiber that supports the beneficial microbes present in the gut. Second are probiotics. Probiotics are beneficial live microorganisms. And postbiotics are the products made by bacteria that affect a range of physiological processes. For example, short chain fatty acids are examples of a postbiotic. Now, what is the role played by these short chain fatty acids in mucosal immune responses? Now, if you see, this is the high butyrate producing bacteria. Then if you take good dietary fiber, then there is a larger outer mucus layer. Okay. Now, this butyrate causes inhibition of NF-kappa beta, which prevents the formation of these pro-inflammatory cytokines. Butyrate also induces the Tregs. Tregs are T regulatory cells. These are basically form a balance. There is a balance in the body between the inflammatory cytokines, pro-inflammatory cytokines, and Tregs. Now, Tregs, they secrete anti-inflammatory mediators, so they inhibit inflammation and autoimmune responses. Now, whereas a person who has decreased decreased dietary fiber, it will lead to decrease of butyrate producers and a thin mucus layer. Now this will give access to the adhesive bacteria. Now this bacteria will come through, will break the tight junction. This is called leaky gut, and they will come and they will activate the immune cells and inflammatory cells, and there will be induction of Th17 cells and Th1, which are proliferated. Now these butyrate, that is, they have also strong anti-inflammatory effects, but they can also cause epigenetic modulation of gene expression. I'm not going to the detail, but to just tell concisely that butyrate downregulates the activation of transcription factors by hyperacetylation, including NF-kappa beta, and modulates gene expression. Whereas the LPS and LPS, if the bacteria have reached the gut, that is due to leaky gut, they will cause the potentiation of these NF-kappa beta and pro-inflammatory cytokines. Now, these normal microbial flora also has a big role to play in innate immunity. We know that there are microbes produced PAMs, that is molecular pathogen-associated molecular factors like flagellin, LPS, peptidoglycan, and these are recognized by TLRs, that is, or called pattern recognition receptor factors. They consider TLR and non-receptors. Now, like flagellin will be recognized by TLR5, the LPS will be recognized by TLR4. So they are very important. This part forms a link between the innate and the adaptive immunity. The gut metabolites like the short chain fatty acids will activate macrophages and dendritic cells, which will activate these further the T regulatory cells. And as I told you, the T regulatory cells will control the inflammation, and also the dendritic cell will lead to the formation of IgA. Now, this serum IgA is very, very important in the gut immunity, and majority of the vaccines like rotavirus vaccine or any mucosal immunity vaccine, we want to produce this secretory IgA antibody. So this is plays a very important role in preventing the mucosal what do you say, that it protects the mucosa from an attack of these pathogens like rotavirus, maybe Vibrio cholerae. So these secretory IgA antibodies are very, very important. Now there is a protective barrier function of this commensal microbiota. They compete and adhere to attachment sites in the brush border of intestinal epithelium. They compete for available nutrients, and they produce antimicrobial peptides and bacteriocins. This prevents attachment and subsequent entry of pathogenic bacteria into the epithelial cells. This phenomenon is called colonization resistance. So this is a very important phenomenon. Now, what happens when our balance is lost? Any imbalance is known as microbial dysbiosis. Now, this could be because of overgrowth of pathogens or opportunistic pathogens. It may be due to a depletion of healthy microbes, or decrease in microbial diversity, or difference in interdependence. Now, what causes these dysbiosis? We know that more and more in India, the obesity is increasing, especially in the teenagers, because they are taking all these packed food, the processed food. They're very fond of processed food, high sugar intakes, colas, food additives. Then other factors are high alcohol intake, and genetic makeup is also important. But very important factors are stress, anxiety, and depression, chemotherapy for cancers, antiviral drugs, hormone therapies, and antibiotics. They make a big chunk, which can cause hormone this imbalance. Now, what happens when this imbalance happens? This imbalance always leads to some negative health connotation. It will induce chronic inflammation, and it will cause alteration of the immune response. And outcome of this inflammation is metabolic disease like type 1 diabetes, obesity, many hepatic diseases, coronary artery disease, atherosclerosis, gastrointestinal infections like inflammatory bowel disease, and cancer. More and more research is showing that they are being implicated in colon, pancreatic, gastric, esophageal, and gallbladder cancers. Now, whether or not this inflammation or tumorigenesis is induced depends on host response to the colonizing microbe. What is the balance? Whether we have bacteria which are elevating tumor growth, low in number, and species promoting tumor growth are high number, then cancer might be the outcome. Now, coming to the dysbiosis and GI-related disorders. The major disorder we discussed today is inflammatory bowel disease. Now, this leads to severe abdominal pain, weight loss, vomiting, and diarrhea. And there is a decrease in specific firmicutes and increase in bacteroidetes and facultative anaerobes, such as Enterobacteriaceae. So the gut dysbiosis is very much linked to inflammatory bowel disease. Now, this IBD is driven by T cells. I told you about that there is a balance between in the mucosa, between the Treg cells and the cells which are producing inflammation. The inflammatory cells are Th1, Th2, and Th17. If there is balance shifts to the inflammation, that is Tregs are not able to control the inflammation, then the disease will occur, as has been shown in experimental colitis. If you transfer the Tregs, then it can prevent it. So there is a balance between TH and Treg, and this is maintained by the microbiota, their abundance, relative abundance. Now, coming to obesity and metabolic syndrome, this is a big disease. In fact, there's an epidemic of obesity and metabolic syndrome. Very nice studies have shown that germ-free mice, which are protected against obesity, and if you transfer the gut microbes for conventionally raised obese animals, this will lead to dramatic increase in body fat content and insulin resistance. Insulin resistance is responsible for diabetes. Now, this gut microbiota, these studies have shown that is critical determinant of micronutrient uptake, energy regulation, anti-inflammatory, weight gain, and metabolic disorders. So this is the study that in the obese mice, they saw that the ratio of this is the ratio of firmicutes and bacteroides. Now, this terminology is very much used for the ratio of firmicutes and bacteroides. If firmicutes have increased and bacteroides have gone down, whereas in the lean mice, the firmicutes are less and bacteroides are higher. So when I told you that when the feces were transferred to the germ-free recipients, they became obese. So this shows that shifting the relative abundance of microbiota changes the function of community within the background host. Now let's see what happens in the obese diabetic microbiota and versus the health gut microbiome. I told you that this is a healthy ratio is there, and this is everything is going normal. The gut is in homeostasis, energy is being harvested, vitamin K is being synthesized, short chain fatty acids produced, and the innate and adaptive immune responses are being stimulated and they are in balance, and liver is functioning properly. Whereas if there is a derangement in this composition, you will have leaky gut, pathogen colonization, short chain fatty acids will produce, but they will decrease. Metabolic endotoxemia will occur. Then the liver will have lipogenesis, fatty liver, inflammation, oxidative stress, insulin resistance. And in the adipose tissue, we have, again, this is very, people don't realize, but the adipose tissue is also very much responsible for inflammation, oxidative stress, and macrophage infiltration and insulin resistance. Like studies have shown, this is actually there's human clinical data. If you reduce 10% of your body weight, then you can actually have a reversal of insulin resistance. So weight loss is a very important component of any regime when we are tackling hypertension, metabolic syndrome, or diabetes. So this I have covered. Now, importance of this dysbiosis is also there in the cardiovascular disease. There's a compound called TMAO, trimethylene N-oxide. This N-oxide, which is produced from this is a metabolite of microbiota. This actually leads to atherosclerosis, risk of hypertension, and heart failure. It is a product of choline metabolism. Okay, you know that atherosclerosis can further lead to heart attack, stroke, and death. Now, but we can drug the microbiome. There is a drug called DMB. If you give this will inhibit the TMAO formation and will lead to reversal of atherosclerosis. So this is how the study of microbiome and the metabolite is important. They can give you newer drug targets. And coming to the cancer and microbiome, before we come to what bacteria are associated with cancer, there is no causal association. There is a difference between association and causal association. Causal means if I give this bacteria, tumor will result. No, it's a multifactorial. The host genetics, hereditary, they also play very well. But how do we study that these microorganisms are important? So we culture the tumors, or culture the area which is in the vicinity of the tumor, and we see if their expression is high. So classical example of an organism causing tumor is H. pylori, which causes gastric carcinoma. This organism produces genotoxins. That is, these are toxins which will lead to the changes in the chromatin and lead to formation of cancer. But this is not the only mechanism. Though some certain pathotypes of E. coli can also produce genotoxin, colibactin, and the cytolethal descending toxin, and can cause this. But many of the bacteria, the like Beta fragilis, Streptococcus bovis, F. nucleatum, and others, they actually may lead to induction of inflammation via toll-like receptors, like LPS of Fusobacterium induces TLR4 and activates NF-kappa beta signaling. And some of these bacteria may actually augment the already process which has been going on. So a lot of data is available in association of these bacteria with colorectal cancer, pancreatic cancer, and gastric cancer, and hepatocellular carcinoma. Now, the knowledge of this field will give you some important leads that we can combine with conventional cancer therapy so that we can enhance this efficacy. How it is done? Then some of the microbiota, I said, they can directly kill the tumor by toxins, but some of these microbiota, like Bifidobacterium, can increase the PDL-N antibody therapy. CpG motifs, they can potentiate the inhibitory IL-10 antibodies, and Bacteroides species can assist the function of this ipilimumab, which is monoclonal antibody against CTL4. And also there may be increased CDT function, so cytotoxic cells, which can actually kill the bacteria. So there are multiple ways by which the microbiota or the metabolite or the products can actually be given in combination with conventional cancer therapy. Now coming to the gut microbiome and animal health, this interest and research is increasing exponentially, because there is interest as therapeutics in domestic pets, farm animals, and wild environments for conservation of species, and as alternative to antibiotics. We know that antibiotics are usually used as growth promoters, as preemptive therapy, or to inhibit the and for treatment also. But the antibiotics will be used for treatment, but the preventive and the preemptive role and the growth promoter role of antibiotics need to be decreased, because there is sharing of resistome between the human and the animal livestock microbiome. So just like humans, the gut microbiome in ruminant gastrointestinal tract is a crucial contributor to the maintenance of intestinal homeostasis, mucosal and lymphoid structure development, and activation of host immune repertoire. Because humans have a large cattle, they have the rumen cattle, and pigs, they have large human have large structure called rumen, and there's ingested there where the microbial fermentation is undergoing in the ingested plant biomass. This actually allows the animal to harness the nutritional value of host indigestible plant biomass. This is even more critical in the beef and dairy system, because if we optimize this, then we can get more beef production, more meat production, and more milk production. So what is the composition of this human microbiome, and what are the functions? We can actually manipulate this human microbiome via dietary intervention to improve host performance, but also not only production of meat, milk and meat, but also in terms of methane abatement. Now this is the bovine gastrointestinal tract, and this is the rumen. You people are more well versed with this than I am, but these microbiota produces same volatile fatty acids, acetate, propionate, and butyrate, which are major products of human microbial fermentation. Now, even the human microbiome is even more diverse than the human microbiome, obviously, because there are more bacteria, the number is more, and they're digesting. They're basically they're eating plants, and they're causing digestion of this matter as compared to the human. So we have some same phyla, Firmicutes, Bacteroides, Brevetola, Proteobacteria, and we have some others also, like Butyrate vibrios you'll find more in the human microbiome. Where we have Archaea, Protozoa, we have bacteriophages. So there's a whole consortium there. When studies have been done on porcine microbiome, and a study correlated the gut microbiome and its functional capacity with feeding efficiency in pigs, it suggested that Streptococcus galolyticus is a potential bioindicator of improved feeding efficiency in the pig. And some bacteria like belonging to Lactospirillacea and Prevotellacea species families and E. coli are associated, E. coli Shigella are associated with low feeding efficiencies. So this is very important. So the gut microbiome actually affects the feeding efficiency in pigs. Now this Kwan et al. Also indicated the role of antibiotic resistant gene shaping the pig gut microbiome. And they said that once you give the pigs have been exposed to the antibiotics and the resistance, there is a risk of horizontal transfer of resistant gene. There are many studies there. So I'm giving only one. In poultry, when the microbiome, 60% of this is firmicutes, except Zika, where Bacteroidetes are the predominant phylum. And similarly here, antibiotics are, a very nice study has come up by Ilokil et al., which have shown that even the usage of antibiotics has not only effect in the gut microbiomes, the shift in the diversity, the reduction in the diversity, there are changes in the Firmicutes to Bacteroides ratio, but also certain microbial pathways and even immune functions could be induced or depressed in response to these drugs. So how do we engineer the microbiome for animal health and conservation? First thing is why we do it. We can increase the production, we can become less reliant on antibiotics. Now, this can be an important effective target in area of pet health and animal conservation to reduce the morbidity and combat infectious diseases. I'm giving you some examples. So one approach is that we give probiotics or prebiotics as supplements. Okay, so we can give single species or multi-species probiotic complexes currently available. Then we can give is a community level approach. We can give whole community microbiome by fecal transfer, by skin transplantation, or human fluid transfer. Or we can do a selective targeting of the pathogen by path therapy or CRISPR-Cas, which is a gene editing tool. We want to reduce the usage of antibiotics for this. So culture-based supplements. Well, I'm giving you some examples. That socially acquired microbiome in bumblebees and honeybees protects against nosema infection. If you give live yeast, they stabilize the gut pH by decreasing acidosis, which is very common in ruminants. Prebiotics are used in aquaculture to decrease the pathogen load. Amphibians, given a probiotic from those amphibian strains which are resistant to the disease, are able to clear fungal skin infections. This is called skin transplantation. Lactobacillus acidophilus decreases the pathogenesis caused by ETEC in piglets. ETEC produces diarrhea. Chicken treated with lactobacilli have higher production of antibodies which protect against pathogen E. coli and Salmonella. Now coming to the community-based approaches, these are very old. Gut transplantation in cattle is used for digestive tract issues, dates back to 1700s. Human transformation, which is called liquid transfer from a human fistula of a healthy cattle to a diseased cattle, is also very common. Then fecal microbiome transplantation is an upcoming field in human research as well as in animal research. Then in aquaculture, we just give the environmental microbiome of a pond, which is free of the disease, and transplant it to the pond which is diseased. There are beneficial effects have been noticed. Then FDA has approved some fudges to prevent the contamination of animal products, meat products by Salmonella, Listeria, Campylobacter, and E. coli. These are actually very good alternative antibiotics, and these are also topics of intense research. But when we are engineering, we have several unknowns still exist. It's not a clear-cut path. For example, if I want to give a high-dose probiotic, or I want to give a repeated dose of lower probiotic, we really don't know. Then efficacy will be dependent on animal development stage. Like if you give to the tadpoles and not the fully formed frogs, the effects are better. For example, if we want to give the microbiome, probiotics, probably starting at the chick level will be more important, because then the microbiome is developing and the immune systems are changing rapidly. And probiotics require that they have to be given to in a stable form. Now this is a very important problem area, that whatever it has been studied that even the formulations which are present in the market, many of these probiotic formulations are not stable. Then there is a need for high throughput culturing of broad phylogenetic range of microbes from a diverse array of animal hosts. To overcome the current bias of culturing microbes from humans or model system, currently only if you see that we are using microbiotics in various human diseases, so these may not be the optimum for the animal health. So now we have covered why do we study gut microbiome. I've given you examples. Microbiomes can be a biomarker of disease and health. and we can find ways to treat the disease condition. Now, how do we study the gut microbiome? Problem with gut microbiome is that 30% of total bacteria in the gut are only 30% are only culturable. 70% is non-culturable. So we need, first thing, what is there? What is lying there? We need metagenomic approaches like 16S ribosomal RNA gene sequencing or whole genome sequence-based metagenomics analysis, which is called a shotgun analysis. These are both effective means to detect number and diversity of microbiota. But these are not the only tools. So we need a combination of tools. For example, the composition we can study by biomarker profiling. In this, what we do is just, if I found that Streptococcus, a particular species of Streptococcus is associated with colonic rectal carcinoma, and I just do a real-time PCR and look for this. This technique is cost-effective, semi-quantitative, but it lacks the functional information. So we do metagenomics. In metagenomics also, there are I told you two approaches are there, 16S ribosomal sequencing and then whole genome metagenomics, the shotgun metagenomics. The resolution is very good, strain level resolution there, but it is very expensive and computationally very intensive. Then we can look at the product. This is called metabolomics, and this is currently a big area of research. This is done by LC-GC-MS platform. This is semi-quantitative or it can be targeted on targeted, but the problem is that origin of the metabolite is unclear. Which bacteria is producing which metabolite? Then to study the function, we can do by two methods, metatranscriptomics and metapictomics. Now, having just a gene is not enough. We want to see which genes are getting transcribed. Again, this is done by NGS of RNA. The pros are that host and microbial gene transcripts are there. Cons are that you need to preserve the RNA and host genes may predominate the signal. Metaproteomics is the protein expression, again done by LC-GC-MS. It's again semi-quantitative and similar to metabolomics. The origin of proteins is unclear, but we need what we need to study this whole, ideally, we need all these approaches in parallel so that we can make a comprehensive view of host microbes. So I've given you some tools which are used, pipelines which are used. These pipelines, many of these pipelines are under development. Shotgun metagenomics is upcoming as comparison to the gene marker analysis. There are many tools there. In this, what we do is we take the whole, for example, I take the whole stool or whole environmental sample, and we just take out the DNA, prepare the library, and take whole genome. Then we assemble the genome and find out what is the phylogenetic analysis we do, what is the abundance, what is the alpha diversity, beta diversity. You must have heard these terms. And metabolomics and metaproteomics and metatranscriptomics I've already covered. So there are many sequencing companies which will do the work for you, the sequencing. This is no big deal. But the problem is the analysis. So de novo assembly of bin reads is required. The draft genomes are to be constructed, and then you need a lot of machine learning and pipelines. Some of the pipelines are free. Some of the pipelines you need to develop. So all the big institutes in USA and UK, they are making their own pipelines, and this thing analysis is a big pain. So metabolomics, why this is important? Metabolomics here, not only we are measuring several hundred to 1,000 biochemical molecules, but it also allows the identification of molecular pathways which are regulated by intestinal microbiota and how these pathways are affected by antibiotic use, nutrition, and intestinal disease. If you can find out the pathway, then you can actually find a product also, therapeutic product also. So you can also find novel probiotic candidates through metabolomics, and you can find key immunomodulated metabolites. And for example, physiological concentration of secondary bile acid inhibit the growth of enteropathogen C. difficile in the GI tract. So just to give you one example that how metabolomics is important. Now to conclude this talk, I hope I have tried to make it easy. So now we are going into an era of personalized medicine. Now for personalized medicine, patients should be stratified based on their microbiome signatures, their heredity, that is genotype, and also the geography. Like if you see the gut microbiome of Western people is different from those of I told you about the African children. Similarly, Indians have particular food habits. So our not only will be affected by the hereditary, but also by the type of food we eat. Now, because microbiota plays central role in different aspects of the host, there exists potential in cancer intervention by combining conventional cancer therapy with microbiota modulation. If all the aspects of interrelationship are clear. So this is a very big emerging field. Then we can, another emerging field will be development of microbial biomarkers for detecting disease status in multiple cancer types. For example, Fusobacterium nucleatum or Granulocatella adiens abundance and decreased Leptospirotica and Saccharomyces species are seen as potential biomarkers of pancreatic CA cancer detection. Then we have probiotics and fecal microbiota transmission. These are promising area. More and more research is being done to find out newer and more effective probiotics. Then we also need very good culture techniques to get these deep culture techniques to get these probiotics. And fecal microbiota transplantation actually can save lives in severe Clostridium difficile disease. And further metagenomic diseases will help us to correlate particular population, gender, and species with disease incidence. Now, this is the thing which I said, Jaisa An Vaisa Man. This is called gut-brain microbiota axis. We have seen that the brain produces what the neural and immunological factors. This is called the HPA neuroendocrine axis. This will affect the gut microbiota. The gut microbiota will release neurotransmitter, neuropeptides, and some microbial derived peptides, which will actually even function they can alleviate your mood, can maybe help in anxiety disorders, depression disorders. If gut dysbiosis can cause Parkinson's disease, Alzheimer's disease. So this is an area which is also again a very important area of research which is coming. So I again thank Dr. Deepti for giving me this opportunity.
It was a very nice speech. Dr. Mudit, are there some questions from the students? Or
good morning.
I would like to tell you we have about 73 participants, and there are UG students also, which they have joined I think a bit late, but still they are there. PG students also are there.
Good morning. Good morning, ma'am. There is one question from Hina Malik. She is asking, HGT, isn't HGT a concern for microbiome-based precision medicine?
Actually, before we, you mean horizontal gene transfer, no? So when we have to see for fecal transplantation or probiotics, we also do the resistome analysis. And you're right that we have to avoid giving those microbiota, which actually will promote the antibiotic resistance. So usually when we do fecal transplant, microbiome transplant, it is done in two ways. It can be done in two ways. One is that you have everything known. So you're doing a mixture of these probiotics. Okay, you know everything, that this is the organism present, this is the antibiotic resistant pattern, and this is the virulence, whether they are free of any virulent genes or not. So these are commensals. So there are various platforms to study these. Second important part will be that, for example, a patient has come for cancer treatment, and before the bone marrow transplantation, so he has come to us in a state where we have not started the anti-cancer therapy. So we take his stool and freeze it, and when he becomes the neutropenic, because when we give cancer treatment, the patient will become neutropenic. Then we give his own feces to him. Or third option could be that we can have a healthy family member. Okay, so from whom we can give a fecal transplantation. So you're very right that we have to take care of all these things, but generally, we would like to avoid this situation.
Thank you, ma'am. That was a very good explanation. I think Dr. Hina must have got the answer. Any other question if you have? She is still available. And if you don't have any question, I will send you or share the link or the email ID.
Ma'am, may I ask one more question regarding the analysis, if you allow, please? Ma'am, I am going to do this shotgun metagenomic work in my research, and I am learning about these um,
Okay.
analysis term by Kaiju and Megaspades. But the main concern is I'm not able to do it on my, I mean, how you people are doing it. Are you doing it your own, or you are
Yeah,
getting it analyzed from some?
we have, you need, see, the company can give you, they can, their analysis are not good. Okay. First thing is that you have to check the quality of your reads. When you have checked the quality of reads, then many softwares are available free online, and you can do a little bit of analysis on your own. Then you need a very good bioinformatic expert to do the machine learning. So we have in our department a bioinformatic person. We have a big system and high throughput system. So for analysis. So because you have to study the alpha diversity, the beta diversity, the many indices, then you have to do principal component analysis. This will give you an idea of what is the abundance, what is the diversity. Then you basically what further would you like to do is to find out if there is any particular bacteria which is lighting up. Okay, that is functional annotation. This is a tough part. This principal component analysis, the two companies will give you the analysis. Okay, and but this is not the end of it. This is just starting of the analysis. Then you have to do. You need machine learning tools. And many, if I would suggest that you take bioinformatic help, okay, from the person who is there in your institute, because otherwise it is there's huge tons of data will be there, and it will be very difficult to make out what this data is telling. So computation is very, very intensive, and everybody is struggling. Everybody is struggling with that. Not only you, everybody struggles. That's why I included that slide which shows various tools on shotgun metagenomics. So you can go through those tools and see what data you are producing.
Is there any other question from the audience? Is there any other question? Okay, thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much for the excellent explanation.
Thank
Now,
you.
before going for conclusion, actually, we had in our webinar one other component that was e-poster competition.
Okay.
And we have some 18-19 entries which we got, and out of those posters we have selected, our committee was formed, and the result of that is there. So I would just like to display in front of you also what are the posters who have got different prizes. So that is why we are not concluding and telling. We want you to also see that what our students have done and whom we have judged.
Okay.
Just there. So the first prize goes to second year student, that is BVSC student, Sanju Singh. So this we all thought that because he took so much interest in personally taking up, because a lot of literature was already available in the net and a lot of cut copy paste can be done. But this fellow took up time to understand, because he was second year BSc student and he drew all this thing. I think Sanju Singh is she. So she took up a lot of time, and so we all came up to the conclusion that this should be given the first prize.
सबको share करना था उसका.
I have not shared.
I've shared the whole result.
Wait a minute, ma'am. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. Then I'll do it.
Creativity of a second year student.
Very nice.
Congratulate him. Yeah.
Very nice.
I see. Sorry, I could not share it, ma'am. This was the thing which was there. Sorry, I was really not knowing.
You have to give me one of these. I could have included in the slides. Very pretty, very nice.
So this was because this was only the first or only entry which was handmade. So she took up time to make it and think that she should participate. That is why we all came to conclusion that she should be adjusted the first.
With
Yes, ma'am. The second prize goes to. Is this visible? The second prize goes to Hansmeet Kaur.
This is also very nice.
She is a PhD student from Department of Veterinary Microbiology. Currently pursuing her PhD in the area of current parvovirus or virology under Dr. Gurpreet Kaur. So this we have come to conclusion that this has to be adjusted at second one.
Also very nice. Very informative.
Shall I shift to a third one, ma'am?
the next one.
Yes, ma'am. Wait a minute, ma'am. Wait a minute. The second prize is shared, ma'am. This is again one more student of our department, Asia Mustaq. She's continuing her PhD. She's a PhD student under Dr. T.S. Rai.
Actually, this sums up my talk also. Good bacteria, bad bacteria. Very good, very good.
The theme of the year was sustainability. So that's why.
Yes, sustainability is very important.
And the third prize is for Karanveer, ma'am. This is the presentation.
This is also very good.
And this fellow is working is MDSC student from Department of Veterinary Gynecology and Obstetrics. So he took interest particularly in microbiology, and he submitted one entry, and we found that
Yes. Stress less. Conclusion is stress less. Eat healthier, breathe fresh air, limit antibiotic use. Such a beautiful message.
This we also like, ma'am. This webinar committee said this was the contagious issue: stress less, eat healthier, breathe fresh air. That is what yoga is telling.
Yes, actually, we have to go back to our ancient science.
Yes, ma'am. So this fellow, that is why we thought that. Next, we have some consolation prizes, ma'am. So, the first consolation prize is for Shrikant Vallabhani. He's also an MBSc scholar, and he's studying at Sri Venkateshwara Veterinary University, Tirupati. So from Tirupati, he has submitted this entry.
Yeah, quite informative actually.
Actually, the content was more, so the
Yeah,
committee did not
yeah,
want
but
to
still,
put it into it. Otherwise,
yeah,
the content was good, but it was more.
yeah.
The second consolation prize is Wasavi, Kopu Wasavi. She's an MBSc student, again MBSc student from our department. She has just completed, means she has just submitted her pre-thesis. And she's also a virologist, but she took time and interest to particularly participate in this competition. And this is what she has submitted, and we found she should be credited with consolation prize.
This is also very good. Actually, this is very good. Kind of a summary slide.
Yes, ma'am.
Very good. I wish you had given me these. I would have put all of them into my talk. Very nice. Very nice. Actually, they have very good concept. That means I was a bit worried that I'm talking of some difficult things, but when I see these posters, I see that the talk was not really going above head transmission. It
was fine, ma'am. People were
It
understanding.
was good, sir. It was understandable, ma'am.
Yeah, I tried to digest it and give it a very lay person's terminology. But some of the concepts were tough, I know. But they already know about it.
Ma'am, and one more consolation prize is there. So this entry was submitted by Dr. Deepa, and she is doing her research work on Mycobacterium, and she took interest particularly in microbiota or microbiome and tried to submit her entry, and we found it good.
She's written microbiome, the treasure trove waiting to be unlocked. Very apt. Very apt. She's written about fiber is a key ingredient for a healthy microbiome. Very nice. I think the kids have very good understanding of the microbiome. They already have a very good understanding of the microbiome, how the microbiota is important. This is really nice. The treasure trove waiting to be unlocked.
Okay, ma'am, that was all we have from our end. We had not many, but we really have taken some selected out of 1920 posters, ma'am.
I'm impressed. I'm impressed by the slogans they have and the slides they have made. Very impressive.
I think the students will be very much motivated by your thing.
Yes.
Thank you very much, ma'am.
I was hoping for more questions. I thought they won't understand.
Yes, I am really surprised. Why they are not
either they understood everything.
No, ma'am, actually, no, it's not like that. Actually, there is a hesitancy part of it, and otherwise might be having a lot of questions. It's not that.
Yeah, I understand. Especially on online platform, there are
a bit of hesitancy because they are interacting with you for the first time.
Yeah.
And they really feel that otherwise they must be having a lot of questions. This is my view, ma'am, because they ask us a lot of questions which we many times fail to answer them, but
nobody can answer all the questions. Nobody, otherwise there will be no need for research, though. You can answer all the questions.
Yes, ma'am, that is true, but still that is why we rope in experts from different institutes so that they can help our students to at least motivate them and to at least make them aware of the current knowledge and technology which is prevailing, so that they are the futures, ma'am. Since, ma'am, we don't have any other questions, I think I shift on the onus to Dr. Gurpreet for the Thanksgiving. Thank you very much. I found your talk excellent, ma'am. Thank you very much, ma'am.
Thank you so much.
Hello. So Department of Veterinary Microbiology is thankful to Dean College of Veterinary Science, Gadwasu, Dr. Sarpreet Singh Kuman, for allowing us to organize World Microbiome Day and rendering all help under IDP. Many thanks are also to the speaker, Dr. Neelam, for providing nice talk on gut microbiome in human and animal health, and providing information for the benefits and the ill effects of the microbiota that is surrounding us. So we are thankful to all the participants for participating with us today to celebrate this World Microbiome Day today. And at last, we like to congratulate all the winners of the e-poster competition who got prizes today. Thank you.
Right. It was very nice talk, ma'am, and I would like to thank you for giving us and sparing your valuable time. I mean, we are so much grateful to you that you could join, and I mean, you could start a new talk and interaction with you. I would like to thank you very much, ma'am.
Thank you, Deepti. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure. It was my pleasure.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
I think, ma'am, we should end the talk if you allow.
Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much.